All right, I think we're at a great volume of attendees right now, so I will be getting it started. So, welcome everybody so much for our first webinar, Going Local with Local Logic. We're going to be doing a series this summer. So, watch your email. This is our big kickoff with Realtor.ca, and we're going to have other folks join us that to talk about location and technology and real estate and what's happening in the online real estate space today and how it's impacting companies across North America, Canada, US, major portals, tech companies, etc. So we're really excited to have you guys join us and really grateful for your time. I know time is valuable. This is also recorded, so really appreciate those of you that made it for the live event. Feel free to chat us, ask us any questions. And this is our agenda for today. We'll do introductions in a second. We'll go over the Realtor.ca story. We're talking about the buyer journey that Realtor.ca investigated as they came up with a lot of their new solutions, and which really drove a lot of decisions that they made for their customers. Then we're talking a little bit about the future vision for Korea, and then we'll have an open question. This will likely not take more than 30 minutes, actually. It'll probably be a really efficient conversation. So I'm hoping for a lot of questions and engagement. So please feel free to interject. Again, thank you to Justin Wakan from Realtor.ca who is joining us today. Justin has been with Korea for over 7 years. He has a background actually coming from the automotive space with the Canadian equivalent of AAA. He started off as an assistant marketing manager. If you're the Office fan, he didn't start out as the assistant to the assistant. He was the assistant marketing manager. He's been super interested in real estate tech. He's been buying and selling homes personally, and that's what attracted him to join Korea, to really get involved in the real estate space. Hey, and Justin, if you want to just add a little bit about your responsibilities at Korea.
Yeah, thanks, Pierre. Happy to be here. So my current function at Korea is managing the Realtor.ca product team. So what we do is we build Realtor.ca, we do the research, we talk to users, and it's all about making Realtor.ca a better platform. And I just forgot something before we get started, since you're such a Warriors fan.
Uh-oh. Nice. Oh, there you go. There you go.
Especially for you.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Justin. Myself, I'm Pierre Calzadilla. I'm the head of growth here at Local Logic. Been in real estate tech and as a broker side actually for over 18 years. Started off in New York City as a broker on the brokerage side, as on the e-business marketing side and sales side as well. And then did 9 years with Trulia. And over the last 18 years, I've trained and presented to thousands of brokers across North America. So really excited to be here today with everybody. All right, let's get into it. The Realtor.ca story. As we go into this, maybe, give us a quick overview of Realtor.ca. We'll stay here for a second. Give us a quick overview of Realtor.ca. How did it come about? Where is it? What's the story of Realtor.ca? Because we have folks from the US too who may not know it.
Sure. So Realtor.ca actually started as MLS.ca back in the early 2000s, I believe. And it was rebranded as Realtor.ca a few years before I joined the association. And what's happened with Realtor.ca is it's a pretty unique situation where, for your listeners in the States, you can almost attribute it to a similar sort of thing as the broker public portal. But in the case of Canada, we're getting data from every single real estate board in the country. And that makes it that much more valuable, right? It's a situation where you have boards, franchises, brokers, everyone really buys into this vision and the idea that having a strong Realtor.ca brand really supports realtors at the end of the day, because at the end of the day, Realtor.ca is owned by realtors, and it's about promoting their listings and the work that they do. So
great. And so some interesting stuff. So Realtor.ca, for those on the call, you guys don't really you don't monetize like a typical web portal would with like lead gen, where you charge per lead. The leads go freely to the agents?
Yeah, exactly. That's one of our core differentiators. The idea that, there's no advertising on the platform. It's about the realtor. It's about their listings. And the leads that are generated go directly to the listing agent. And that's something that is included in what members get for being a member of the association.
Cool. And so to help folks understand the scale of Realtor.ca, this is some ComScore stats. Can you run down sort of where Realtor.ca is on this great list?
Yeah, so we're pretty pleased with these numbers. Realtor.ca is that dark blue line at the top. I should have made it red, of course. And because of that unique position that Realtor.ca is in, we've been in that spot, since we started using ComScore. Actually, just a little correction there. There was a dark period in 2018 when we launched a new mobile site and missed putting the ComScore tag in, and we dipped market share there. Something I tease the team about all the time. But the idea there, it's not just the work that the team's doing on Realtor.ca. It comes back to this whole story of it's something that the country really supports.
That's great. And then in terms of the site itself, can you give me just a high level for the techies that are on the call, and even for the non-techies, like what are some of the core platform tools that you've used to like, what's the technology that it's built on?
Sure. So last year, actually, we migrated just about everything on Realtor.ca and the rest of our infrastructure to the cloud on Microsoft Azure. But largely, Realtor.ca is all custom code. And our teams built it all from scratch in-house. We have a lot of integrations with, partners like LocalLogic, like yourself. We use different content management systems such as WordPress and other custom CMSs that we built for different content on the site to pull and feed content through. Obviously, we get listings information from real estate boards across the country, and we store that. But in general, yeah, it's all custom code.
Awesome. So like you've overseen a really pivotal time here, right? Because like this is the last 7 years of consumer activity in real estate has really drastically changed. Take it from a guy who was at Trulia from 2006 on, and can you tell us a bit as a product owner, these last 7 years, like what have you experienced? What has changed with the consumer front, and how do you tackle, managing the product for the number one site for a whole country?
Yeah, it's a fun and exciting challenge. It's one of the reasons I'm still with CREA, because it's such a great challenge. So when I started, even prior to me starting, Realtor.ca was very focused on delivering listings. It was it still is an advertising vehicle for listings, but it was a matter of, we show whatever we get. And while that's still core to what we do, the industry in the past, at least in my time here, has changed significantly. Just if you look at the platforms from mobile or from desktops to mobile, and how consumers interact with this content, and especially their expectations about it, has changed significantly. So we're no longer just a simple publishing platform for listings. We dig into exactly, what consumers want to see from listings, how they see listings, the context of use for those users, what they're looking for. So we started really focusing on the journey and then the different segments of the people that use Realtor.ca, as opposed to just displaying the listings themselves.
So let me ask you a question. So number one site in a country, millions of consumers on there every single month. You work for an association, right? Fundamentally, you have like 90 bosses in some cases. Like how do you manage how do you protect yourself from looking at competitors or new entrants and just being told all day, like, hey, they're doing this, you guys should do this. Like, how do you go through that? How do you decide? What's your process to decide, like, to not just copy features from competitors?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's exactly it. The first thing is we don't just copy features from competitors, because if that were the case, then we'd be running a losing race. So part of my role and my responsibility with the product management team is we're here to represent the users. And we bring their perspective to the team to solve problems. We interview them, understand their pain points, all those sort of things. It's really about helping them progress through their journey. And I like that you pulled up the book, because it was something we were talking about last week. This is one of the fundamental strategies or approaches of how I look at this. And when I talk about the user, it's really about understanding what their jobs are. So what Pierre's got up on screen, Competing Against Luck, is one of my favorite books, and it's basically a framework or a theory around how to help users progress to their goals. So this is one of the approaches we like to take with the product management team, is that we're not just delivering functionality. We used to have roadmaps where it was just project after project, and it was, checkbox features, and the idea that, users going to get this new piece of functionality, but the shift in focus is really around what problems we're solving for them and how we're helping them progress through their process. So that theory is the jobs to be done theory. And did you want me to talk about that?
Yeah. Specifically, I really love to hear. So when we, did the pre-call, you discussed that, there's certain expectations you have of your product team when they apply this jobs to be done framework. And I think that's super interesting to share with folks.
Sure. So, one of the things that we started doing last year is everyone on the team is required to do a weekly user interview to really get to understanding the context and the pain points of what users experience. The jobs to be done framework, the idea here is it's about helping users progress to their goals. So I think the most common example from the book is the milkshake story. I don't know if anyone's seen the video, but the whole idea is, you have a fast food company. They're trying really hard to grow their milkshake brand. So they think, maybe if we add 20 more flavors, it'll get more people buying milkshakes. And if we add, 6 more sizes, we do need something between medium and large. And the whole idea there was, from the business perspective, they're looking at making their product appeal to more segments. But when they started really drilling into why users are buying milkshakes, customers are buying milkshakes, they really started hearing feedback that the real job of the milkshake was to keep people entertained on their long commute to work, or keep their bellies full until lunchtime, so they don't have growling stomachs in their 11 a.m. meetings. And if you take that back to what the business team was working on, the idea of introducing new flavors and that sort of thing, that really wouldn't support the job that the user is hiring the milkshake to fulfill.
Got it. So, no, that's great. Sorry to cut you off, because I want to interject and bring this over to what you guys did with the buyer journey and sort of how you tackled this. So
sure.
The jobs to be done is the main sort of anchor here under this, right? So what's the job of your product? Is that the best way to package that? What's the job that we're trying to help our end user complete? Is that fair?
Yeah, I can give you a quick example.
Sure.
So one of the recent projects the team's been working on, if you're on Realtor.ca, we've got a beautiful banner of a son and a father with the scooter, and that was one of those sort of scenarios, and I give credit to the marketing team for finding that photo, because I fell in love with it instantly and knew that was going to be the banner. But we were very literal before coming into this this direction, and we were trying to communicate the idea that a realtor needs to be in the photo, and that photo has to have a client interaction to make sure that we're showing the value of using a realtor on Realtor.ca. And while that's true, that's part of the core of what we do, that's not how you sell it to a consumer, because the consumer's job is not to be in that transaction at this moment in the stage. One of the consumer's jobs with Realtor.ca is validation. It's going there to understand that, I'm looking at the most current and up-to-date information, and this is representative of my financial situation and so on. In the case of my wife, who's on Realtor.ca every evening on the couch, it's entertainment. her job is to be entertained by the site and look at real estate as just new content that she's consuming all the time. So the job isn't always as direct as your business objectives, but tailoring your experiences to supporting those jobs and helping users progress through their goals is really, at the end of the day, what's grounding that theory.
And that's great. And so like this sort of drove you guys to create sort of, or to do some research on what is the buyer journey and what are the jobs, right, that this, consumer is trying to do. And so we have two sections of this that we're going to talk about here. So one is the first time home buyer, and then we're going to talk about sort of the repeat buyer. And, tell us a little bit about how you guys, took this and applied, first, like, why did you do the research? And then how did you apply this for that user base?
Mm-hmm. Sure. So a couple of things here. When we started this, we didn't really have a great mobile experience. So, part of it was understanding who our primary segments were to do some targeting. And, this isn't necessarily the best practice nowadays to do these journeys. We did these a few years back and are in the process of validating them again. But the idea here was, who is the largest group of users that's coming to Realtor.ca? And that's between the first time buyer and the repeat buyer, with the repeat buyer being the larger group. And understanding at what point in their journey do they touch a Realtor.ca branded experience. So, whether that's a listing on one of our other Realtor.ca network sites or Realtor.ca itself, at what point do they start searching? At what point do they get serious and need mortgage calculators? When do they actually reach out to use a realtor to value their services? Because it's not at the very beginning of the journey. So the journey was really to help us understand those different touch points, obviously the pain points as well. And one of the bigger pieces here when we did this was really understanding the context between desktop and mobile. So, if I get a notification or a spouse sends you a listing and you're on the bus ride home, how do you consume that listing on the bus versus in the evening on the couch with the laptop? And how does that change throughout your journey? So really about understanding the context of use for each segment.
Cool. And so you broke down these segments, right? Each of these segments into, like, I think it was about 5 or 6 pillars.
Yeah, we did 5 with one of them being a realtor as well.
Great. And so, like, what's a mistake, for example, or a decision that you guys made that this sort of helped you uncover or change course on? Or a good move, not to be a mistake, but either way.
Yeah, sure. Lots of mistakes along the way. And that's why we keep going. The idea here is that once we, sort of uncover their roles, or their journeys and their touch points, we realize it's not always in line with how we set up the site. Because again, we're coming from a place where the job was just to get the listing in front of people. We weren't really thinking about the journey. And this is years and years back. We weren't really thinking about how it's consumed, the context of use. It was, we get something from a realtor, we're putting it on Realtor.ca as soon as possible. And that's the end of the story. And what we learned from that was there's much more nuance to that experience. And when to show certain types of information, there's just different ways of going about doing that.
Cool. And so, there are a lot of decisions that you guys made out of this that was, done to sort of drive, what you learned from these visitors. And so this webinar series, as a reminder, is really about data. And how did you use data then to drive decisions, right? And, in many different ways, like not just data for decisions and data for the user, and how this local information and things matter to a consumer at a different level based on different stages. So let's go into this a little bit and first start with, like, how do you know, like, what to do or what not to do, right? What's the ways that you guys understand the user feedback? And then what did the data tell you to do once you started looking at that data?
Mm-hmm. So what we use for collecting feedback, you got that on the screen, 4C, Google Analytics. We also have an internal ticketing system that members use to provide us feedback. And of course, all of our interview data that we do, usability testing, that sort of stuff is all sort of captured in a variety of systems. But that's really, our tech stack from a feedback perspective. So we have a number of ways that we sort of bring it all together, analyze it, prioritize it. But at the end of the day, it's about driving valuable traffic and business back to the realtor and their listings. I can give you an example of how that feedback has really made a significant change for us. It's probably 3 or 4 years ago, before we introduced the idea of embedding multimedia content. So that's virtual tours, videos, that sort of thing. Yeah, exactly. We used to link to that sort of information on a broker's site, and we got a lot of strong pushback saying that it's more important that the traffic be on their site to consume the video content and that sort of thing. But what users kept repeatedly telling us was, we don't want to jump to different experiences. We lose our train of thought. We don't quite understand how all of this comes together. We want that to stay on Realtor.ca. We want that context to be consistent. So that was a scenario where we got a lot of pushback, but the data just kept telling us, provide all that context on the listing. Another good example is the neighborhood tab as well. We want to provide as much answers to the user's questions within the context of the listing. So in the case of these virtual tours, iGuide is one of the suppliers we integrate. As soon as we did that, we heard almost instantly that people were spending more time on the page. They were consuming this content. And the last time I checked, 80% of these videos and virtual tours actually get viewed. So of all the ones uploaded, yeah, it's around 80%. So it's just an example of how the user feedback really improves that experience and ultimately supports our goals to support the realtor at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's great. And so in case the point was missed, which I think is really valuable here, is that here you have a user group, which is your internal user group, who doesn't want to see the traffic, not come to their site, thinking that that's more valuable for them and for their goals. But in reality, the consumer is saying, hey, I want to stay in one spot, get this information, and then contact that realtor. And so in turn, you got much more engagement and much more return on that, and your clients, your constituency benefits, because now they're getting that consumer to contact them at a much cleaner, higher rate, because now they're engaging in a much cleaner, higher way. So yeah, exactly. That's awesome. You guys also put local logic on your site. You've done it over the years. How did you end up? This is the map interface. We're on the listings also. Why go to a large map? Why go to, include location information? What data did you see there, with the consumers that drove you guys to make that decision?
Sure. Good question. So, another important thing to our users is having a big map. And my designer complains about this all the time because he wants to do more with the space. But we keep pushing back and saying, people come to Realtor.ca because they love the big map experience. They want to be able to browse. They want to be able to explore. And of course, they want to be able to get answers to the questions that they're looking for. When they're looking for a particular listing, we want to be able to tell them, what neighborhood they're in. If the commute makes sense for them, schools, is it a quiet area? And all of that context is the type of stuff that we knew Realtor.ca was lacking, because we were so focused on the listings, we weren't really thinking of the journey to the listing. So a partner like you guys have really helped us with providing a bit more context, because at the end of the day, like I said earlier, we're really trying to answer as many of those users' questions while they're in their search, while they're in the Realtor.ca experience, and stuff like lifestyle and school catchments really help do that.
That's great, man. That's great. And then, and here's a school catchments as well. So on the actual listing page. And so you talked about going beyond the four walls. Like, what's the key information that you guys found is like, man, this is like they use this all the time.
Yeah, it comes back to jobs to be done and the idea of the journey maps, depending on the persona. There's cases where people don't really care about the price, or they don't really care about the features and whatnot. It's all about, in the case of a repeat buyer, for example, a young family with kids that's doing an upgrade. The most important search criteria for them is to be within the school catchment area, so so their kids don't have to switch schools. And that's the exact example for school catchment, because thinking about their job, they want validation in the fact that they can buy this new home, but it also keeps their kids in the same school. That's their primary objective. So
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and we see that too on the usage side, right? You know, consumers by far schools is number one, and then you have things like grocery stores and quiet rounding out and the top features too. It's pretty fascinating. So we're here towards almost the end. We have a couple minutes left, and we want to talk a little bit about the future vision for Korea. And folks, I see some questions coming in, and I'm going to ask a question in here for a sec. I'm in a second, Justin.
sure.
You know, what's coming for Realtor.ca? You know, here you are today. You're number one. There's a lot of people coming into the Canadian market, a lot of competition coming in. What's your lane that you're focusing on to continue your guys' great growth and great position?
Yeah, it's overarching. It's continuous improvement. So we want to make sure we have the right data in the site. You know, that's we recently added sold data to Realtor.ca, local logic data. There's a number of sources of data that we're using to expand what we offer to the users of the site. We also want to make sure the speed is important. We made the Realtor.ca advertising network real time last year. So, you know, if a realtor is using us to get their listings out to TD Bank or Globe and Mail or those sort of places that we partner with, they have trust that that's happening in real time, because depending on what market you're in, those couple minutes really matter. And of course, the user experience. My team's primary focus is making the search experience, reducing as much friction as possible in that search experience, partnerships and that sort of thing.
Sorry, I didn't mean to click the slide. and then I think you had talked about mobile as well.
Yes, of course. Yeah, so we're in the process of repolishing our mobile applications. Like I said earlier, there's been a huge shift to mobile. In our case, it's almost 70% of our users are mobile versus desktop. So that's quite significant, and it makes us really rethink how we approach the two platforms.
That's great. That's great, Justin. So we have a couple questions that we'll go into here. One that was sent in actually, you know, and I've seen this happen in many markets, you know, photos become contentious, right? In terms of like size and consistency. With 90 boards, I imagine that's like borderline impossible, but I'm just curious, do you guys have any vision to like, hey, let's standardize photos for the whole country? Like, can you do that? Is that possible?
There's a number of ways to do this. I mean, ultimately, you know, we work closely with the 90 or so boards and associations across the country, to make sure that the data we get is the best quality that it can be. You know, there may be technical restrictions in certain cases. We're working on changing our infrastructure so that, you know, we can pull data from boards as opposed to them having to push it to us. Because you look at a board like Toronto, for example, it's tons and tons of bits and bytes every second that's going back and forth. So, yeah, we're aware of that. Dave, if you let me know, or send me an email after the fact. I'm not sure what board you're from right now, but we could definitely have a conversation offline about that.
Great, great. And then there was also a, you know, question. While some questions are coming in, like,
Yeah, I see that.
what keeps you up at night? Like, you know, when you think about your job, like other than your kids, right? Other than your kids and family and, you know, all that stuff. What are some things that like keep you up at night, you know, with Realtor.ca?
Yeah, my daughter last night, same situation. You have young ones too.
Yeah, yeah.
um, yeah, I've got a couple opinions on this. So, I look at myself as an operational manager, and what keeps me up at night from that perspective is ensuring we're getting as much we can, as much out of our existing team that we possibly can. Because all of those sort of efficiencies that happen, and thinking about continuous improvement and all that sort of work, um, uh, that's one approach to how you can get more done. But then when I look at it from a product leader perspective, the type of things that keep me up at night are Amazon and Facebook. And if those guys come into the Canadian market and they look at real estate, and we know they are, and they want for sale listings by realtors, that they would be a serious threat in our market. Because at the end of the day, we are a not-for-profit. We don't have the same sort of deep pockets that some of the larger portals and players that are coming into the Canadian market have. But as I said at the forefront of this conversation, we do have something unique and special in Canada that does help us really, really stand tall, and it is a tough barrier to break. So we're proud of that, and we're proud of the support that we have from the associations and the members and the brokers and franchises, and it's pretty great in Canada.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, you guys definitely have a special gift. It'd be awesome to see that kind of, unity happen down with your southern neighbor. In terms of products and things that you're doing for your customer, like what are some things, you don't have to mention only Local Logic obviously, but they're like, what are some things that if somebody out there is building a site, somebody out there is trying to engage with consumers, what are like 3 tips that you'd give them to focus on? One, loud and clear, sounds like focus on your client's pain. Like what else would you say?
Yeah, you need to obsess over the user's problems and look at everything from their perspective. At the end of the day, that's and a lot of this stuff is common sense for good product people. And some of the best business books out there, they really just package common sense into nice followable methodologies. But in terms of building new features and products, you've always got to ask yourself and your team, how does what you're doing benefit the end user? In our case, we also ask, how does what we're doing benefit our members? So you're asking, how does what I do benefit the end user? And how does what I do, or how does what we're looking at doing move the business forward? At the end of the day, those are the 2 core questions that you always need to ask.
Got some great questions from some of your members.
Sure.
First, there's a compliment here that the improvements that they've noticed over the past few months to Realtor.ca have been fast and furious. So I think everybody's noticing your output. The question is basically like, and I think we sort of covered this a little bit. It really was a change and a shift in how you guys developed your product, right? You used to develop more in a feature base. Now you sort of changed, and you're like, no, it's not the feature, it's the pain. It's what are we doing for the for the customer. How much, then the question here basically is, how much also has it played that there are new competitors coming into the space? Like how much is that, sort of pushing you guys to innovate further?
Yeah, from my perspective, the competition has been one of the biggest players in terms of getting Realtor.ca that much more support. As you know, and as you saw from the numbers, we have always traditionally had a strong market position. But as new players keep coming into the market, it begs the question of how Realtor.ca can stay competitive and stay a leader in this space. And that's really given us the green light to just go crazy and make sure we're doing all the right things. There's conversations about funding models for us to do more, but at the end of the day, it's really the support and the feedback that helps us make sure we're doing the right things.
And I see a question here also from a member. As an individual broker, what can they do to help support Realtor.ca?
Good question. One of the ways to do that is to get involved. Talk to your real estate board, join at your local level, apply to be a CREA on the CREA board of directors. We need strong people that support what we're doing and look at look at it from a Canadian industry perspective and not just an individual market perspective, because we need strong leaders that see it this way. And of course, feedback, or like I've got a user experience team that loves talking to members and consumers and your clients. On a micro level, please reach out to me and we can have a chat about how you can be part of what we're doing.
That's great. And I think I have one last question here. I just saw it. I lost it. Where did it go? This might be a tough question to answer. I don't know. It's from Moa. What's the relationship with Kijiji and Realtor? Probably, the best way to ask the question is what's the relationship between Kijiji and Realtor.ca? Do you guys feed them listings?
Sure.
Is that how it works? Okay.
Yeah. So we have a product called the Realtor.ca DDF, and that's really Realtor.ca's advertising network. So we get a feed of listings from a real estate board. That information is published on Realtor.ca, and when brokers decide to opt in their listings to the entire network, it gets on sites like Kijiji, for example. They're one of our partners. They're a real estate advertising website. So when our members have the opportunity to automatically send their listings to 15 or so different real estate sites. We've got a couple new partner sites. Globe and Mail just went online about 2 months ago. So the idea here is to make the job easier for the brokers to not have to post and then repost on Kijiji and repost on this other portal. If the price changes, it's automatically changed on all those other sites. So it's to save them time, get their listings more exposure.
Great. Sold data in Canada has been super under wraps, and I think there's a lot of political stuff involved in there, maybe just access to data. Can you shed any light for especially for me, actually, I don't understand. So is sold data public or not? Is it like in the US, for example, for those who, to share some inter-country data, like in the US, there's states where a state says sold data is private, like Texas, it's called a non-disclosure state. And so you cannot get sold data through a public means unless there's like a really significant amount of paperwork to where the owner is allowing that data to be publicly, shared. So just curious, how does it work in Canada? What's the blockers to sold data being on Realtor.ca? If you can shed some light on that. I think that'll be our last question.
Sure. So I'm sure everyone is following the court cases that happened with the Toronto Real Estate Board. But the idea there is those are for broker websites, for what they call virtual office websites, where there's an existing relationship between a client and the broker. And then that's where they would disclose all the sold information. What our board has approved us to do on Realtor.ca is to publish historical sold prices for listings that are active on Realtor.ca at the moment. So we've been working with provincial regulators, boards and associations, pretty much every stakeholder in this area to make sure that when and where we go about publishing sold data, we're not putting our members on the wrong side of the law, because there are the same sort of privacy concerns and the idea that in some provinces a seller only needs to agree to it, where in other provinces it's the buyer and the seller need to consent to the disclosure of that information.
Got it.
So in Nova Scotia, we launched the sold data project in January, and then a couple of weeks ago, we also turned it on for New Brunswick as well. And we're slowly making our way across the country, depending on what the regulators say and what the rules are.
I got a question here. What impact have you been able to measure for how location data helps the buyer's experience?
Yeah, so we're seeing huge numbers in terms of likelihood of reaching out to a realtor. So those odds are much higher for those that drill into the neighborhood and the location information. Time on site is much higher. It's positive for all of the success measures that we use to make sure that we're adding value. Because at the end of the day, the people that are digging into that information are further along in their buyer journey, because they're not only validating the fact that the price is right and the kitchen's right, they also want to make sure the neighborhood's perfect and a lot of other more granular type details.
Well, cool. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's okay.
Cool. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Justin. And here's a quick overview of Local Logic, some of our products. And this is all location-based data, listing-based data. We appreciate everybody attending. If you guys have any questions of local data and how local data can be applied to your platform, please let us know. Here's our contact info for everybody on the call. And we have a webinar coming up in July with, I believe, can I say who it is, Aaron? Or should I wait to say who it is?
I think you can give a quick sneak peek.
Cool. Yeah. So it's going to be with Sotheby's, Realty.ca, and we're going to talk about sort of they're working on some really fun, exciting things that aren't launched yet. We'll be talking about it in July as they get closer to their launch. So really, thank you so much, Justin. Thank you, Realtor.ca. Thank you for everybody coming on the call. We really appreciate your time today. Give us feedback. Let us know what you liked, what you didn't like, what we should have dug in more so we can get better at this, and see you on the next webinar. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.